Honorable Leader of the Opposition,
We need a plan for our security, safety, and our economy. A Canada First plan. But for months now, Mr. Trump has been threatening tariffs. Here we are today without a plan. The big plan is a Zoom call, Mr. Speaker. There's no plan to reverse the liberalization of drugs that has gotten Americans so worried. There's a lot of chaos that our Prime Minister has caused at the borders. There's no plan to cut the taxes that are harming our economy during these uncertain times. Where is the Canada First plan? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I had a good call with Donald Trump last night. I underscored that we've been working together for decades to create prosperity on both sides of the border. We must work together. That is how we can meet challenges together and create prosperity for all. We will always defend Canadian jobs, Canadian workers, and Americans too. We will do this in a nonpartisan way. We will work as a team. That's what works in teamwork, nonpartisanship. I've spoken with the Premiers Ford and Legault. We will all continue to work together to defend Canada. The Right Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Right, but apparently the call didn't work because just a few minutes later, President Trump threatened Canada with tariffs. The same goes for softwood lumber and Buy America. For 9 years now, our Prime Minister has not gotten any gains for Canada. And now he's admitted that he broke our immigration system. There are 700 foreign students who need to leave Canada within a year. They can illegally cross south into the United States, which would be a huge issue. What is the Prime Minister's plan to fix the immigration system that he broke? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, there are international students who come from everywhere in the world to study in Canada. They are in Canada during their studies. At the end of their studies, they return to their countries of origin. That is what happens in the majority of cases, an overwhelming majority of cases. And we do have a system for when people do not return to their countries. Our immigration system does help us address current challenges. We have reduced immigration to Canada recently in order to give our economy a chance to catch up. That's part of an immigration system that works and that meets the adapting and changing challenges that we have today.
Plan for economy and security that puts Canada first. But despite the fact the Prime Minister has known for years that Trump was threatening these tariffs, and for 3 weeks that President Trump had won the election, the only plan he has is a Zoom call. No plan to reverse his disastrous liberalization of drugs that have killed people and now threaten our borders. No plan to fix the broken borders that he caused. No plan to cancel the tax increases that will drive billions and many jobs away. Where's the plan to put Canada first?
There you go. I love that, Canada First.
Instead of panicking and falling back on slogans like the Leader of the Opposition, we rolled up our sleeves and we're getting to work. We're working with all the premiers, pulling together in a Team Canada approach, because that's how we defend Canadian jobs from coast to coast to coast. I spoke with Donald Trump yesterday evening, talked about how important it was for us to work together to solve some of the challenges we're facing as a continent, as countries, but also work to grow our economy.
Dude, he's wearing the bracelet from Taylor Swift concert.
The border. This is the responsible, methodical approach we're taking as we move forward,
right here.
While our opponent falls back on slogans and fear.
Our Prime Minister is wearing a Taylor Swift friendship bracelet.
He spoke with the incoming president, and moments later, Mr. Trump put out a tweet slapping a 25% tariff on Canada. So that worked about as well as the Prime Minister's efforts on Buy America and softwood lumber, which continue to be penalized, even though the previous Conservative government got both of those things lifted. Now move over to drugs. The Prime Minister's disastrous legalization and liberalization of drugs has the Americans worried, in addition to costing 47,000 deaths in Canada. Where's the plan to stop the drugs and keep our border open to trade?
The right honourable. Listen,
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Leader of the Opposition is just making stuff up. I clearly spoke with the President of the United States an hour and a half after he put out his suggestion on tariffs. The reality is we're going to continue to work constructively with the incoming administration to protect Canadian jobs, to protect Canadian growth, to take the responsible approach that isn't steeped in partisanship, that pulls together the Team Canada approach that stands up for Canadians instead of throwing our arms up and saying all is broken like the Leader of the Opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, that's even worse. The statement went out promising tariffs before they even got a chance to speak. It's kind of like him backing down on Buy America and backing down on softwood lumber, Mr. Speaker. Now let's move to the tariffs the Prime Minister wants to impose on our economy. Quadrupling the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre would cripple our economy. New tax increases on work and energy would do likewise, sending hundreds of billions of dollars south of the border. Now that Canadians are facing this economic crisis, will he at least cancel his plan to hike taxes so we can save jobs?
throw some W's in the chat, eh?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we see once again the Leader of the Opposition flailing and inventing stuff to try and fit his preferred attacks into his priorities. The reality is we're going to continue to work constructively with the incoming administration to do what Canada and the U.S. have always done: create prosperity together, protect jobs on both sides of the border as we grow the economy. When it comes to drugs, Mr. Speaker, we've taken serious steps on that, and we'll continue to. If the Leader of the Opposition is suggesting he wants to recriminalize marijuana, let him just say that.
What? No one's suggesting that.
Order!
Look at him, look at him, look at him! He wants to mute the microphone.
You're asking your caucus to last night? Order!
Here we go, French frogs.
Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, over the past few days and hours, we have received signals that we are about to go through some significant insecurity, and we will experience that in Parliament too. There's protectionism, there is rather strong diatribe, strong choice of words. Now is the time to unite people, to make people feel safe, especially economically. We should support the most fragile and the most vulnerable in our society. The Prime Minister, is he willing to reconsider his rebate plan so that seniors can feel that they are economically and financially secure? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are struggling to make ends meet. We're aware of that. That's why we're offering a tax break to everyone for the next few months on groceries, on clothes.
That's it, though. That's all you get, right? It's 2 months, 60 days.
That Canadians buy regularly. We're also looking into ways to acknowledge that workers in this country have carried a heavy burden the past few years. They have protected our economy. We want to protect the economy. We want to protect them and their loved ones. We want to acknowledge the hard work of hardworking Canadians.
Okay, a reminder to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet.
Mr. Speaker, before today's workers, other workers came before them. Workers who worked all their lives, who paid taxes all their lives, and who have no other option. The government is giving checks to people who don't need them, and the government is not giving checks to those who need them the most. Would the Prime Minister agree to decrease the salary and give the extra money to those who need it and to seniors? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, all Canadians are struggling in different ways. That's why we're investing in creating more daycare spaces. We're also investing through the Canada Child Benefit, which is increasing every year. We're also trying to help seniors. We're helping these seniors through dental care. We're helping seniors by increasing the guaranteed income supplement. We did so by 10%. And we also increased the OAS for those over 75. We want to help all Canadians, especially hardworking ones who are also struggling, and that's why we will be going ahead with this initiative.
Donald Trump's threats of tariffs could threaten hundreds of thousands of Canadian mortgage-paying jobs. The only thing a bully responds to is strength. So where is our plan to fight back? Where is the war room? Where is a concrete plan to bring our issue before CUSMA? Why isn't the Prime Minister fighting like hell for Canadian jobs?
Call an election. Get Pierre to fight. This might be Jagmeet's breaking point, by the way.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, rather than panicking, we're engaging in constructive ways to protect Canadian jobs like we have before. I don't think the idea of going to war with the United States is what anyone wants. What we will do is stand up for Canadian jobs as we have before, as we will continue to. Stand up for the prosperity we create when we work together. Stand up for the challenges that we're facing, that we're protecting Canadians from. There is work we can do together. That is the work we will do, seriously, methodically, but without freaking out the way the leader of the NDP seems to be.
Stop freaking out, Jagmeet.
L'honorable député de Burnaby.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Board, if the government ignores this problem, they need to take it seriously. They can't afford another letdown. Les attaques de Trump n'étaient pas une surprise.
Trump's attacks did not come as a surprise. We saw the writing on the wall. But the Prime Minister prefers to turn a blind eye, and he's been saying that everything is going fine. Meanwhile, thousands of Canadian jobs are at risk. Why hasn't he done anything about Donald Trump's threats? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we take our economy and defending it seriously. That means we can't take action out of panic. We need to defend the principles that will help us thrive. In North America, we all succeed when we work together. We will work with the American administration to address the challenges that both of our countries are faced with. We will work together to create prosperity for our workers and to defend our workers. That's what we've always done. That's what we will continue to do. Mr. Speaker, this is not time to panic. This is time to work hard, and that's exactly what we're doing.
That's an interesting tactic.
Member from Regina Capel.
We need a Canada First plan to fix what the Prime Minister has broken. The first time he went head-to-head with Trump, the Prime Minister was forced into accepting humiliating concessions on agriculture, steel tariffs, and on Buy American. And that was when Canada had a stronger position thanks to a decade of low-tax, pro-job, conservative policies. After 9 years of economic vandalism, though, he's put Canada in an extremely vulnerable position. Per capita GDP is now lower than 9 years ago. Canada has the most indebted household amongst our trading partners. We have the worst housing inflation, and food prices have risen 37% here, faster here than in the U.S. Now that he's negotiating a position of weakness, why should Canadians expect anything?
Yeah, man. We're not messing around.
Honorable Farmer
Canada first, baby.
for export promotion and international trade.
Mr. Speaker, I want to be clear. We will always be there to protect Canadian workers and Canadian businesses. We have been there for Canadians before when we renegotiated NAFTA. I remind the member opposite that it was the Conservatives who wanted us to capitulate during that time. But we stood strong, and that's a testament to the facts. Canada-U.S. trade is at an all-time high last year of $1.3 trillion. Canada places the highest priority on trade and the integrity of our shared border. Mr. Speaker, we look forward to working with the incoming administration.
The honourable member for Regina Capel.
It was that Prime Minister that was forced to accept humiliating concession after concession. And now he's kneecapped Canada's economy. He's slapped a massive carbon tax here while the U.S. doesn't have one at all. Yep. He's raising taxes on investing in Canada while the U.S. is fighting to attract investment there. Exactly. He's imposed a production cap on Canadian energy, meaning Canada will produce less of what the U.S. needs to buy. Yep. There are less than 60 days left to act. It's time for the Prime Minister to put aside his partisanship, his ideology, and his ego. Will he strengthen Canada's position by cancelling his carbon tax and all tax hikes on jobs and investments?
Yeah. Wow. Throw some W's down for an interest year.
Mr. Speaker, we'll take no lessons from the Conservative. Their strategy strategy, Mr. Speaker, last time was to capitulate. On this side of the House, as the Prime Minister said, Mr. Speaker, is to take that seriously and methodically. Mr. Speaker, we have been engaging with our U.S. partner on three key things. The first one is security. Security of the border, security of the North and the Arctic. Resilient supply chain when it comes to semiconductors, when it comes to critical minerals, when it comes to energy, and put forward a growth plan for North America, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we'll fight for Canadians, we'll fight for industry, we'll fight for our country, Mr. Speaker.
No, you don't. Oh, Melissa Landsman up next.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Everywhere we look, we find more evidence of economic carnage, and now we're up against the biggest economic and security superpower, and this government has no plan. We need a Canada First plan to fix what the Prime Minister broke. When he took office, our GDP per capita was 81% of the US's. Now it's fallen to 73%. It's a made-in-Canada problem, and it's not about vibes. It's driven by higher taxes, higher spending, higher regulation, and this government's economic vandalism. Faced with the threat of tariffs, when are they going to stop the vandalism and start fixing the crisis so Canadians have a chance?
Yeah.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, when the Conservative Party of Canada wanted us to back down during the last round of NAFTA negotiations, we stood up for Canada. We stood up for Canadian workers. We stood up for the steelworkers in Canada, Mr. Speaker. We stood up for Canadian auto workers. We stood up for our farmers and agricultural workers, Mr. Speaker.
Right.
They want to know what the plan is. We plan on doing it again and getting a win-win for Canada and the United States.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, they backed down themselves last time, and Canada has become poorer since then than Alabama. That's not a record that anybody should be proud of. Our productivity gap with the U.S. costs every Canadian $32,000 a year. Average return on investments are 35% higher in the U.S. than in Canada. Our government's plan to quadruple the carbon tax. They doubled housing prices. They increased taxes on work and investment. With the threat of crippling tariffs, will the Prime Minister end all of the tax increases so Canadians stand a chance?
Wow.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we have an excellent relationship with the United States, a relationship that is mutually beneficial. We do enormous amounts of trade with the United States, and the United States
We do.
on Canada for much of its energy supply, Mr. Speaker. They want to know what the plan is. The plan is to continue to work with the United States in order to protect Canadian jobs, in order to protect the Canadian economy, and make it grow for everyone.
That's right.
L'honorable député de Mégantic.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, we need a plan to put Canada first and end this Prime Minister's economic vandalism. He broke the immigration system. He is unable to protect the borders. He's left our economy with a huge debt. And young people have lost all hope of ever being able to buy a home.
Freaking right.
The Prime Minister's plan to put Canada first and protect the futures.
Dude, this is going to launch Canada into a
Honourable
actual recession.
Mr. Speaker, we won't be taking any lessons from the Conservative Party. The last time they put forward a strategy, it was a strategy to capitulate to Americans. We will always put Canada and Canadians first. As the Prime Minister said, we've been working with American counterparts for months. We've been discussing the safety of our borders. We've been talking about the resilience of our supply chains in semiconductors and critical minerals and energy. Also, Mr. Speaker, we do have a growth plan for North America. We will always be there to defend our workers, our industry, and, of course, Canada itself. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Well, what we do know, Mr. Speaker, is that after 9 years, this Prime Minister has thoroughly failed and constantly failed. What is his plan to put Canada first? He's failed with our border. He's failed softwood lumber. He has created chaos in our immigration system. He's botched things with our passports. Here's the real question. What is the Prime Minister's plan to put Canadians first? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, what the Conservatives don't want to talk about is Canada's investment track record in 2022. Yet last year, Mr. Speaker, Canada received almost $60 billion in investment. Can you believe that, Mr. Speaker? We had historic investments in the automobile sector, in the critical minerals sector, in energy. Mr. Speaker, Canada has become the strategic partner of choice in a no-carbon economy, and Canada will also be a leader in artificial intelligence and nuclear energy. Mr. Speaker, Canada...
No, Canada's investing in nuclear in the Indo-Pacific, not in Canada.
Mr. Speaker, Donald Trump wants to impose a 25% tariff on all Quebec and Canadian products. That would be a disaster, including for the Americans. First of all, we welcome the fact that the Prime Minister has agreed to meet his counterparts from Quebec and other provinces tomorrow, but he will have to come up with a clear approach. Supply management must be protected immediately through C-282. Ottawa has to demonstrate that it will not bend on our lumber, aluminum, aerospace, and all of Quebec's economy. Now, will the Prime Minister appear before his counterparts with a plan? The Honourable Innovation Minister. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for the very important question. As the Prime Minister said earlier, Mr. Speaker, there will be a First Minister's meeting. Mr. Legault will participate in the meeting. Now, of course, Mr. Speaker, we will always stand up for aerospace workers, aluminum workers, the new and emerging battery industry in Quebec. Mr. Speaker, we cannot panic. It's not the time to panic. It's the time to highlight Canada's advantages and ensure that we are defending all of our sectors and all of our workers. The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, Trump's tariffs are designed to force Canada to tighten its borders against illegal migration and drug trafficking. Quebec has been demanding for years that Ottawa fix its colander of a border. Quebec has even had to deploy the SQ, Quebec's police. For years, the Bloc Québécois has been hounding Ottawa about human smuggling and organized crime. Even before Trump was elected, we were calling for more resources at the border. Despite all of those warnings, Ottawa did nothing, and our economy is now threatened by Trump's tariffs. Do they now understand that we have to take action at the border? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we didn't just start to understand it now. We have been supporting our border agencies, the RCMP, CBSA. We've been doing this for years. We have the same interests as the Americans. On both sides of the border, we want to ensure the safety and integrity of our borders. Canada wants to determine what happens in Canada. It's the same in the United States. We have a long history of daily teamwork with the United States, and we will continue in that vein.
But we need somebody who's actually respected.
Well, the Prime Minister will have to announce that he is finally ready to fulfill his responsibilities at the border. He has to announce how he's going to shore up his colander of a border by January. That is the bare minimum. The bare minimum after having shirked his responsibilities despite repeated warnings from Quebecers. Human smugglers and organized crime have been running the show at the border for years. Now, the result of the Prime Minister's inaction is the threat of 25% tariffs, which would put Quebec's economy at risk. Will the Prime Minister finally announce that he will allocate sufficient resources to the borders? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, once again, we have always sent sufficient resources to the border to support the excellent work done by the CBSA and the RCMP. They do that work with police counterparts, be it the Sûreté du Québec, Quebec Police, or American police. We will continue to guarantee that they have the technology and the human resources that they need. In fact, we will even better support those workers and that technology to ensure that they can continue their exceptional work.
Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
We need a Canada First plan to fix what the
They found their new slogan, I'll tell you that much.
illegal drugs. 47,000 Canadians have died under this Prime Minister's watch. That's more than we lost in the Second World War. We need to fully reverse his liberalization of drugs that kills our people and threatens our borders. We need to secure our borders against the importation of chemical precursors that make fentanyl and other deadly drugs. Criminals are taking advantage of our drug policies and cooking fentanyl ready for export. Will the Prime Minister finally admit his policies have failed and end his insane drug policies?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, every life lost due to the illicit toxic drug supply in this country is a tragedy for families and for communities. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we've invested over $1 billion in treatment, prevention, harm reduction to save lives. We've worked with our U.S. counterparts on precursors, and we will continue to do the work to save lives based on evidence, based on healthcare, and based on protecting those who need help the most. We will not look away, Mr. Speaker. We are here to protect those who need our help.
The Honourable Member for Fort McMurray Cold Lake.
That's not a plan. We need a Canada First plan to fix what the Prime Minister broke on the addiction crisis and illegal drugs. There's been a 200% annual increase in drug deaths under his watch. We need to fully reverse his liberalization of drugs, ban the drugs, prosecute every trafficker, secure our borders against drugs and chemical precursors like that are making fentanyl and other deadly drugs. We need treatment and recovery so we can bring our loved ones home drug-free. Will the Prime Minister finally act in the interest of Canadians and fully reverse course on his radical liberalization of drugs?
Don't do it for Trump, man. Do it because we just need to make Canada better.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we will lead with compassion, we will lead with healthcare, and we will lead with evidence. Mr. Speaker, since 2015, we have been investing in the treatments and the pathway that means the most to those whose lives we need to save. On that side of the House, Mr. Speaker, they cut the drug treatment fund by 2/3. When they cut the CBSA, they cut the drug checking laboratories. They don't protect Canadians. They don't address the illicit drug supply, and they don't understand that people need health care and help, and they need our compassion. Shame on them, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Simcoe North.
The Prime Minister's economic report card is in. Canadians have the highest consumer debt in the G7. House prices have doubled. Per capita income is lower today than it was 10 years ago. And the average Canadian makes $30,000 less than their American counterpart. All as a result of this Prime Minister's economic vandalism. And in the face of economic uncertainty and global trade imbalances, this Prime Minister's plan is to increase taxes on job creators, entrepreneurs, and farmers. Will he enact a Canada First plan and stop these tax increases to keep our jobs and investment at home?
The Honourable Permanent Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Maybe that Conservative member missed the memo. We're actually taking federal taxes off, Mr. Speaker. We're taking the GST off of everyday goods in order to help Canadians. We are wondering on this side of the House how the Conservatives could be against a tax break for Canadians. This will put more money back in their pockets, Mr. Speaker, right around the holidays when they need it most. Mr. Speaker, this policy is good for Canadians. It's good for the economy. It's just bad for Conservatives.
The Honourable Member from Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, if the government doesn't want to listen to Conservatives, maybe they'll listen to economists at National Bank who found that real GDP has contracted 4% since 2022. This is unprecedented outside of a recession. It's a made in Canada, per person GDP recession caused by the economic vandalism of this Prime Minister's policies, whose only plan is to increase taxes on everybody, farmers, physicians, entrepreneurs, and all people who want to invest in Canada. When will the Prime Minister enact a Canada First plan to keep jobs and investment in Canada and our Canadians at home?
The Honourable President.
This is like super scary times for Canadians.
My honourable colleague doesn't quite understand is that we do have a Canada First policy. That's why we have the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7. That is why we have a AAA credit rating. That is why we have inflation being decreased not once, not twice, but 3 times to 1.6% in September, Mr. Speaker. And at the same time, we have supports for Canadian, for example, the tax holiday and supports for 18 million workers come this spring, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we have the balance right, and we have a Canada First policy for Canadians.
God, her voice, man. Shut her up.
The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Once again, the Liberals have failed Canadians that need help most. People living with disabilities, students, and seniors have been abandoned by the Liberals' rebate program. My constituents are rightly furious. And Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that the students, the seniors, and the people living with disabilities in Edmonton Strathcona are not feeling a vibe right now. They are really, really struggling. And of course, the Conservatives would do nothing but cut these programs for Canadians. Will the minister fix this program and get help for those who need it the most?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the GST holiday will apply to everybody. All Canadians will benefit from this tax break, Mr. Speaker. But one of the things
Thank you. You saved
that
us.
people with disabilities aren't working, Mr. Speaker. 62% of people in Canada with disabilities are working and will benefit from the check. There are 1 million seniors in Canada that are working and will benefit from this check, Mr. Speaker. Canadians are working hard and they deserve a break.
The honourable member for Courtenay Alberni.
That's not all Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Seniors and students in Courtenay Alberni are being left high and dry with the high cost of living. They're living on tight budgets and deserve a helping hand. Instead of helping, the Liberals decided to exclude seniors and students from their $250 rebate. They're letting people down again. Conservatives, they only want tax breaks for their rich CEO donors and big corporations who gouge Canadians at the grocery till. Will the Liberals fix their mistake and ensure seniors, persons with disabilities, and students get the rebate?
Yes.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I take issue with the insinuation that persons with disabilities don't work in this country. 62% of persons with disabilities will benefit from this rebate because they are working hard.
What about the rest?
1 million seniors right across Canada are working and will benefit from this check, Mr. Speaker. And all Canadians, without exception, are going to benefit from the tax holiday that we just announced. We're there for Canadians and will always be there to have their back.
What the hell is wrong with you? What about all the others?
The honourable member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives spend their time amplifying anger and fanning the flames of division without offering specific solutions. In contrast, last week our government announced measures to support Canadians during the holiday season and into the new year. Could the President of the Treasury Board provide more details about our plan to help Canadians save money this holiday season and beyond?
I would invite the Honourable Minister. I'd invite the Honourable Minister to wait until she's addressed. The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, whether it is $10 a day childcare, increases to GIS and OAS, or the Canada Child Benefit, on this side of the House, we are always there to support Canadians. For example, with last week's announcement of a tax holiday on essential goods, clothing, diaper, food, Mr. Speaker, as well as cash back for 18 million.
Shut the hell up. Cut the tax forever.
While the Conservatives play partisan games, what we have to say is we have no idea whether their members actually would support this measure because they're not allowed to let us know.
Yeah, no one's buying that. So.
And encourage all members not to take the floor unless they are addressed by the chair. The honourable member from Chilliwack Hope.
After 9 years, we need a Canada First plan to fix what this Prime Minister has broken. Our standard of living has plummeted compared to the United States. The last thing Canada needs is a capital gains tax hike on our farmers, doctors, home builders, and small businesses, but that's exactly what this Prime Minister is proposing. His tax hikes will drive investment, jobs, doctors, and food production out of this country at a time when we can least afford it, with the threat of U.S. tariffs on the horizon. Why won't the Prime Minister stop making things worse and cancel his reckless tax increases on Canadian jobs and investment?
I think we're all freaking pretty nervous about the coming months, eh?
It was this Liberal government that reduced taxes on the middle class not once, but twice, Mr. Speaker, and the Conservatives opposed that measure on both occasions. Now, Mr. Speaker, we're coming with a tax break for the holidays. That's going to mean more money in the pockets of Canadians, and yet again, the Conservatives are opposing this measure. Mr. Speaker, do the Conservatives really believe the talking points that they're saying? Mr. Speaker, if they did, they would vote in favor of a tax break for Canadians. That's what we've put on the table. How are they going to vote?
The honourable member for Chilliwack Hope.
Taxing farmers drives up food costs. Taxing doctors means it's harder to find one. Taxing home builders means fewer homes. Taxing small businesses means fewer paychecks. Raising capital taxes means less investment in the tools we need to halt the decline in our standard of living. Jobs and livelihoods are on the line. With the threat of U.S. tariffs coming down the tracks, will the Prime Minister give Canadian workers a fighting chance by cancelling his destructive tax increases on jobs and investment?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I like very much the member, but let me inform him about a couple of things. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to jobs and investment, Canada received the largest investment in Onta's history, Mr. Speaker, $19 billion, the largest investment in 75 years. Canada also received the largest investment in Dow Chemicals history, 127 years, Mr. Speaker, an investment of $10 billion in Alberta. Mr. Speaker, we received the largest investment in 139 years of BHP in Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker, $22 billion. Canada is the envy of the world, Mr. Speaker. Let's talk up Canada and stop saying things.
The Honourable Member for Oxford.
Mr. Speaker, we have learned from this government's own immigration documents that nearly 5 million people will have their temporary visas expire next year. The Minister of Immigration was asked for his plan in committee yesterday, but he had no plan. Can the Prime Minister correct his minister and tell us his plan to enforce and ensure that the nearly 5 million people that leave Canada when their visas expire next year?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees.
Let's examine the latest round of hysteria from the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about 4.9 million documents that apply, sometimes many to one person. These are tourists. These are people, the vast majority of whom leave the country, including artists that come to this country, including Bruce Springsteen and others. Meanwhile, when people's visas expire, Mr. Speaker, they are expected to leave. If they are not, they will be removed. At the same time, the Leader of the Opposition is walking around with a member of Edmonton Millwoods promising not to deport people.
The Honourable Member for Oxford.
Mr. Speaker, again, there's no plan from this minister. And after 9 years of breaking our immigration system, his plan is to ask them to leave nicely. And now they're staring at 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods that will crush our Canadian workers and cripple our economy. We need a Canada First plan that fixes the immigration system and ensures that the 5 million people will leave when their visas expire next year. When will we see that plan?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees.
Mr. Speaker, again, we see now the Conservatives' rollover first program. They're talking about people that are here, that do routinely leave the country. They come in as tourists. It includes a vast array of people. He's answering an OPQ question that they posed us. We were very precise in the answers they gave it. Sometimes it's not 5 million people, Mr. Speaker. It's a number of documents attached to the same person. So let's park the hysteria. Let's talk about real things. Let's talk about the managed plan to migration that is actually doing very well in this country, according to Canadians.
Hear, hear.
No, it's not, dumbass. You can't help but lie. You just can't help it.
It's good timing today for tackling organized crime in our cities and at our borders. Let's hit the bad guys where it hurts, in their wallet. The Bloc Québécois has tabled Bill C-420 to establish a registry of criminal organizations. Above all, we propose to reverse the burden of proof on criminal revenues. We propose to allow law enforcement agencies to freeze or seize gang members' assets if they're unable to prove that they were not acquired through crime. Will the government support us, and what do they think of this? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we are always open to supporting good ideas, to support our law enforcement to fight against organized crime. There already are provisions in the criminal code that allow our courts and to seize assets and bank accounts that are the result of proceeds of crime. But if my colleagues has other suggestions, we are absolutely open to looking at seeing what we can always do to support the important work of our law enforcement. The Honourable Member for Louvière-du-Nord. Thank you. I'll say it again today. The federal government has every interest in showing that it takes the problem of organized crime seriously. The Americans are listening. Our Bill C-420 makes it easier to lay charges against criminal gang members, and most importantly, it gives police new tools to seize the proceeds of crime before they disappear. C-420 makes participation in crime more dangerous and less rewarding. It's a strong message to send to organized crime, both on our streets and at our borders. Will the government support this? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Once again, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for his idea. That's important to support our law enforcement, our attorney generals, and to ensure that no one's benefiting from crime, and particularly organized crime. We recognize the important work that the RCMP is doing with our partners, whether it's Quebec Police, the OPP, and municipal police. There are already provisions in the criminal code, so the Attorney General and myself will always be looking at good ideas to enhance and support law enforcement across the country.
The Honourable Member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
We need a Canada plan to fix the Prime Minister's what he's broke in the Canadian Armed Forces. Under this Prime Minister, our warships are rusting out, our fighter jets are burning out, our army has been hollowed out, and our military is so short of soldiers, sailors, and air crew that our troops are burnt out, and we're short 15,000 troops. Even his own defense minister has described the state of our military as being in a death spiral. Defense procurement has gotten so bad under these Liberals that they can't even supply the ammo and munitions that Canada and our friends need. Why has the Prime Minister turned Canada into an unreliable ally?
The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All of us remember the last time the Conservatives talked about a Canada First defence policy, and we also remember what you did. What they did, Mr. Speaker, they gutted the defense budget. They reduced defense spending to less than 1% of our GDP for only the first time and only time in Canada's long history. And in the last 9 years, as we have doubled defense spending, those Conservatives have voted against every single dollar, just as they voted against support for Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, standing up for the Canadian Armed Forces may require the Conservatives to stand up to their leader.
I don't know why they're trying to take that narrative.
We know, Mr. Speaker, that this minister loves to fudge the numbers, and in reality, former Conservative government bought 5 C-17 Globemasters, 17 new Hercs, 15 Chinook helicopters, 100 Leopard tanks, modernized the Auroras and Halifax-class frigate, and fought alongside our American allies against ISIS and the Taliban. Well, the Prime Minister reverses his $2.7 billion cut to our armed forces and finally invested in our troops and put Canada's interests first.
you go, man. Put some W's down. Put some W's down in the chat, shall we?
The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
And we also remember when the conflict in Afghanistan ended, they gutted the defense budget, $2.5 billion away from it, and reduced it for the only time in our history to less than 1%. Mr. Speaker, I had many conversations with members of the Canadian Armed Forces, and they have never told me what they need is another vacuous slogan. What they said is that they need real investment in ships, and in planes, and in infrastructure, and most importantly, in our people. And every time we have come before this House and asked for the money for those investments and for those people, they voted against it.
Order. À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît.
Order, please.
Vous en avez.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has demolished our armed forces by making poor decisions and not investing enough. He announced reductions in the defense budget, and he is not reinforcing our military. After 9 years of waste, can this Prime Minister have a plan to put Canada first? The Honourable Member.
And our plan to support the Canadian Armed Forces and our plan for investment. But what we know, Mr. Speaker, is that when it comes time to stand up for our allies and to stand up for what we care about in the world, the Conservative members of Parliament stand down. When it came to supporting Ukraine last year with the Canadian Free Trade Agreement with Ukraine, what did they do? They voted against it, Mr. Speaker. They delayed it in the House of Commons. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we actually stand for the values that we care about, and we stand up for people that we care about. We don't just sit down and stand down because our leader told us so. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, I don't understand why they keep trying to take that narrative. It's not sticking.
The Honourable Member for Madawaska, Restigouche. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The holiday season is just before us, and we know it's often a very costly time for Canadians. Our measures have put our economy in an enviable position with respect to other G7 countries, but many households are still having a hard time making ends meet. This has a direct impact on communities. Can the Minister share with us why the Conservative leader should give his caucus members a voice, let them speak for their constituents, and vote in favour of a plan to put more money back in the pockets of Canadians? The Honourable Minister of Veterans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for his question. And unlike the leader of the Conservative Party, who believes in cuts and austerity, we believe on this side of the House in supporting Canadians. And that is why we announced a tax vacation. We want to make sure that Canadians will have the opportunity will help them buy diapers and toys, books, and other necessities. We'll always be here to support Canadians.
For only 2 months. Do they not hear how delusional that sounds?
The Honourable Member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
This desperate Liberal NDP government is bribing Canadians with a pricey gimmick. This temporary 2-month tax trick takes pennies off potato chips, yet adds more than $6 billion on top of this Prime Minister's inflationary deficit. Even the Prime Minister admits every extra dollar he puts into these handouts, it fuels inflation further. Instead of pennies off Pringles, call a carbon tax election now, so common sense Conservatives can axe the tax for good.
Yeah. For 2 months. For 2 months. Oh, that's it. It doesn't make any sense.
Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
This Liberal government reduced taxes on the middle class on 2 occasions, and the Conservative voted against it. Now we're giving a tax break, a tax holiday to all Canadians at a time when they need it most, Mr. Speaker, and the Conservatives are calling it a gimmick. Actually, the Conservative leader is trying to play the Grinch that stole Christmas, Mr. Speaker. We know that this is good policy. It's good for Canadians. It's good for the economy. It's good for our small businesses. It's just bad for the Conservatives.
The honourable member for Calgary, Forest Lawn.
While scurvy makes a comeback, that member's bragging about taking taxes off of candy and booze. While 2 million Canadians are visiting a food bank in a single month, and 1 in 4 Canadians are skipping meals because of this Prime Minister's carbon tax scam that's making Canadians poorer, the Finance Minister says they're just having a vibe session, that she can fix it by taking pennies off of cheese puffs. If Liberals really want to feel the vibe of Canadians, call a carbon tax election so we can axe the tax for good instead of taking chump change off of chips.
The Conservatives are good with the zingers. I'll give them that.
Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Canadian mothers and fathers want to understand why the Conservatives want to take away their $10 a day childcare. Young Canadians who want to buy a first home want to understand why Conservatives want to take away investments that will build 750,000 new homes, Mr. Speaker. And all Canadians want to understand why the Conservatives oppose a tax break, a tax holiday for all Canadians, which will leave more money back in their pockets, Mr. Speaker. It's time the Conservatives come clean. They're against policies that help Canadians. They're against policies that will help our economy. They're just in it for themselves.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, this government's latest tax trick is not going to work. The people don't trust this Liberal trick.
No.
The Journal de Montréal said these 2 restructuring measures have no long-term vision. They're likely to have a minimum impact on a certain number of people at an extremely high cost of $6.3 billion. I wonder how this decision was made. Do you know who said this, Mr. Speaker? The former transport minister and former Quebec lieutenant. Does he agree with his predecessor who has understood this common sense? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. With these Conservatives, it's always partisanship first and Canadians last, Mr. Speaker. Once again, the Conservatives are opposed to helping Canadians. We know that this tax break will leave more money in the pockets of Canadians, but the Conservatives are opposed to this. They're also opposed when we lower taxes for the middle class, and they're also against it once again when we want to take tax off everyday products. It doesn't make sense.
The honourable member for Guelph.
Mr. Speaker, this week is National Addictions Awareness Week. It's a time for all of us to raise...
We need to reevaluate Trudeau's addiction to Prime Minister
towards addiction.
And power.
On this side of the House, we know addiction is a health condition and deserves to be treated like one in order to save lives.
Yeah.
Can the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions share some of the ways our government is helping those in need?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, since 2017, our government has committed over $1 billion to support the work with provinces and territories to save lives and address those who struggle with addiction. We know that doing this work with community organizations, local healthcare providers, and communities, Mr. Speaker, whether they're municipalities or Indigenous communities, is the way that we make it through to save lives and meet people at their hardest moments. We know we need more harm reduction and prevention. We know we need treatment services and recovery and aftercare, Mr. Speaker. We are there for Canadians. We need to open the door to those who struggle with addiction so they're not alone.
The Honourable Member for Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, everyday Canadians are scraping by while CEOs get richer. Liberals are letting Canadians down. They put an expiry date on their GST cut. And on the rebate, the Liberals' message to seniors, students, and people with disabilities is, you don't get a break. It's shameful. And the Conservatives, they only want tax breaks for billionaires, not parents who are just trying to keep up with their bills and grocery costs. Why won't this government make billionaires pay their fair share so that seniors and people on disability get a break?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
I appreciate the question from my colleague opposite. She knows very well that our government has done the most in order to ensure tax fairness throughout the country, Mr. Speaker. We have acted in order to ensure that the very wealthy pay their fair share, and we are helping Canadians, vulnerable Canadians that need our support, as well as working Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Working Canadians are going to receive a check in the spring, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly hope that the NDP will support it.
The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Asia Pulp and Paper and the Wajea family have a notorious track record. All of the alarm bells should have been sounding when their front company, Paper Excellence, showed up to get control of Canadian operations. Instead, this government laid out the red carpet. Now Asia Pulp and Paper controls vast sections of Canada's forests. Now, the Minister of Innovation brags that he's never taken any lessons. Well, obviously, he got played like a rube at the county fair. Why did this government abandon our workers, sell out our forests, and what are they going to do to protect our mills and our forestry communities? Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of respect for the member, but I think he should get his facts straight, Mr. Speaker. In fact, we stood up for our workers and for industry. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we had a national security review. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, they are bound by undertakings for years to come, Mr. Speaker, to protect the industry, to protect our workers, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to national security, we will always be on the side of Canadians, always make sure that we protect our national interests and our economic interests, Mr. Speaker.
Dear colleagues, I would like to draw the attention of members to the presence in the gallery.
Is that it? We're gonna adventure off a little bit, see what else is going on.
A great friend of this parliament and our country.
Members, to the presence in the gallery of a friend of this parliament and certainly of our country, His Excellency Ruslan Stefanchuk, Chairman of the Verkhovna Rada, the Parliament of Ukraine.
Are you a Nazi too?
It being 3:16, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division